Today, we have the pleasure to be with Alex Barrera and Carlos Escobar. They both know this organization very well. So you can see Alex Barrera is not only the CEO and editor-in-chief of the Aleph Report, but he is also one of the co-founders of Tetuan Valley. So thank you very much for joining us today, Alex. And Carlos Escobar, which was the ex-campus lead at Wilford Startups and also was the ex-CEO at Tetuan Valley. So thank you very much, both of you, for being with us today. It's really a pleasure to be with you and to have your virtual presence. We would love to have you on campus, but in this case, it's not possible. So hope to do it again. But by now, we try to do everything online. Okay, so that's all by my part. I really want you to encourage you to use the YouTube chat in order to make some questions. We will share this question with the speaker, and he will have some time to reply the notes. So that's all. I'll give you the access, Alex. Let's see over here. Hello, Alex.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Pleasure being here. Thank you very much, Sergio and Inigo. It feels weird to do this fully online, although I must say that I've been doing this shit since March, so we're all getting used to it. But it's definitely a pleasure being here. And as always, yeah, I was looking at the number, like the 20th edition. Like, that's insane. I have so many stories of how we started doing this, and the fact that this has evolved as it has is impressive. We've always had very international teams, but it is true that depending on the years, we had more, we had less. Sergio, you probably don't know this story, but we even had a team that at the time flew from Singapore to spend a month and a half with us in Barcelona, and they paid for everything and we were like, you understand we don't pay you the flight or the staying here. And they said, yeah, don't worry. We're just flying there. We want to go through the program. So for everyone connecting from all over the place, big pleasure. And thank you so much for your time, for being here. And without further ado, let me share my screen and we can start doing this.
Okay, so now you don't need to take any flight or pay for hotels or anything to join the program. You're quite it's better like that.
Yeah, no,
things from everywhere, like anywhere in the world, and that were in applications. So it's so amazing to receive those applications.
Yeah. So as Sergio was saying, I'll start with my talk. If you have any questions, any doubts, please share them on the chat so we can I can answer. Problem I'm having more of a technical issue. Ideally, you do this with two screens. I only have with me here right now one, which means that I can only see my slides and I cannot see the chat. So I'll answer when I read everything at the end. Okay. But meanwhile, if you keep having questions, please send them and I'll try to answer them all in place. Anyway, so today's session is about effective presentations, and that's something just to give you a little bit more of my background. I've been doing startups for more than 15 years. I was part of the first social network in Spain that was called 20 that got bought by Telefonica. I was one of the co-founders and former CEO of Tetuan Valley. Then we started a small fund. We started investing in some startups. I was also part of the founding team of Startup Bootcamp Europe, which that's a long story that one day I'll share with some people. And then it kind of moved a little bit away from accelerators and pre-accelerators and started working more with storytelling. And the reason why I did that and I started Press 42 was because I saw a lot of the teams having great products, but having a really hard time explaining what they wanted, what they were doing, right? And in the end, it got to a point where those that told the best story were the ones that got the funding, were the ones that got the partnerships, etc. So since then, I've been very much involved around narratives, around storytelling. I was one of the editors for Southern Europe for the Kernel. I was I am one of the co-founders and former editors at Tech.eu. And as Sergio was saying and Inigo were saying before, I'm the CEO and chief editor at the Aleph Report. I still write a lot. If you ever go to the Aleph Report, which is thealeph.com, you'll see that the last post is from quite some time, but I still write a lot. However, I do it for clients, so it's not going publicly there though. But I still write, because a lot of people ask me, oh, we haven't read you, and it's like, I still do. So one of the things I write about at the Aleph is I write about the implications of technology and what are the repercussions for the short, medium, and long term. So basically, what's going to happen? I hate the word futurist, but what I kind of do is I tell stories about the future, how the future is going to look like, and how it's going to affect people now. So I kind of work with a lot of startups. I'm one of the judges for several international conferences, and I see an average of between 2,000 to 3,000 pitches every year, or probably more depending on the year. Okay, so I see a lot of startups, how they tell the stories, and I work with a lot of them personally to try and help them build a more powerful, a more effective pitch. And that's kind of what I'm going to try and share with you guys this afternoon or this morning, depending where you are, and trying to share a little bit of not the basics, because I think nearly everyone now, when I started doing this, no one knew the basics, right? It was like horrible presentations, but with capital letters, horrible clip art and horrible things on screen. And it's like, oh my God, like I just want to kill myself. However, and that's something good for all of you. The average level of the presentations nowadays is way better than 10 years ago, like way better, which means that I kind of shift a little bit my focus on more of the nuisance that you find on the pitching aspect and the kind of things that you need to be careful about when building the pitch beyond like the basic structure. So that's what I'm going to try to introduce now. And just to eliminate or dissipate one of the biggest myths that there is around pitching and startups in general is that startups are unique, and that's not true anymore. Don't get me wrong. I love startups. I am a startup myself. I work with a lot of startups, but there are too many startups. Okay, there are too many startups. We've gone through a phase where startups was a way, and I was discussing this with someone to me, and I said, look, startups was a name definition we used to throw around because we needed a way to differentiate the kind of innovation that startups do from the kind of bullshit that the big companies were doing at the time. Now, it's gotten to a point where, as you see on screen, there are too many startups, and this is pretty old, this slide, okay? But this is the number of mobile app downloads worldwide, and it kind of correlates to a certain degree to the amount of new mobile apps that get released every day, which is insane. So having a startup is not something unique in itself anymore. Maybe the worst thing about this is that there is too much noise, right? It's very hard now to differentiate one startup from the other one. A lot of startups look very much the same. Yes, we have a slight difference here and there, but because there's so many and there's so much noise, it's very, very different to pay attention to it. And I want to focus on this notion of paying attention because, as I was saying, doing a startup is not something unique anymore. It was, as I was saying, it was a way of defining something different from doing business as usual. But now, doing startups is becoming business as usual. So when it comes to the pitch and when it comes to working or explaining what you do, it's extremely important that you understand that being a startup is not what's going to capture people's attention. And neither is the technology either, okay? It's not about tech. And this is something that for some people is still hard to understand. But the truth is, I'm a computer engineer. And when I was doing my degree many, many years ago, there was no libraries, there was no technological stack as we understand today, which meant that whatever you did, you had to do it yourself. Now, fast forward to now, where more or less nearly every single startup out there, or most of the startups, use a very similar technology stack. That means that they use the same cloud provider, they use the same infrastructure, they use the same libraries. Even if you're doing something as advanced as deep learning, for example, you're probably using some kind of library which is very similar to everyone else, like PTorch, or you're using something like TensorFlow. Whatever it is, it's kind of being democratized. I'm not saying that there's startups that aren't unique, and there are definitely from a technological perspective, okay? But in general, most of the, let's put it, the 80% of the technology stack is very similar. Which brings us to the point that if you really want to stand out, which is the whole point of the pitch, you need to start being remarkable. And it's not okay, or it's not enough with having a good product. It's not enough with having a good design. It's not enough with having a good technology or a great idea. You need to be remarkable. And I love this definition, because remarkable, the actual definition is worthy of being or likely to be noticed, especially as being uncommon or extraordinary. Now, 3 points on this definition that I think apply very well to pitching and startups in general, which is, the first one is that the goal now is to be noticed. It's not about the technology. It's not about how badass you are. It's about being noticed. And to be noticed, you do need to have two things. Either you're very uncommon, or you are extraordinary. You have something that clearly separates you from the rest. Now, being uncommon or extraordinary doesn't necessarily connect with having an incredible data advantage or an incredible technological advantage, but most of the times it comes down to being very good at communicating who you are, what you do, and creating some kind of effect that allows people to remember you. And the remembering aspect is one of the most critical aspects, and it's one of the reasons why we do the pitch. The pitch's goal is not to raise money. It is to be able to kind of get imprinted in people's minds. And if I'm looking at 150 startups, I want you to be the one that I remember. It's like, oh yeah, I remember these guys. I'll tell you a real life story from just yesterday. Yesterday I was recording one of the tracks for South Summit that we're putting together, that's going to go live soon. And I was listening to a lot of pitches that I had actually reviewed and worked with the startups. And some of them, like immediately as soon as I saw the name, I remembered. I was like, yeah, these guys were incredible. And I remember because they delivered not just a good product, but because they delivered a fantastic pitch that stayed with me somehow, okay? So, going into the proper aspect of what does a pitch needs to have, right? This is based on what we call the 10, 20, 30 framework. And I want to highlight two things here. First of all, this 10 points that you're seeing, that you're watching on screen right now, are like the 10 basic questions that anyone that is exposed to a new project will have as soon as you start talking about it, okay? They are based on psychological aspects of inquiry and let's say the way our brain works and the way our curiosity works. It's kind of showcased here. So two things that are important. First one is that this is a framework, which means that you shouldn't follow it exactly like this. This is just a way of showing you that there's 10 pieces that have to be there, or that it's increasingly important that they're there. Sometimes you can drop things, and most of the times you can actually change the order of some of these points, right? So feel free to change them as much as you want, to turn them around, to kind of get them to work to your advantage, right? Sometimes the way you narrate your pitch will determine the order. In other cases, your industry or your vertical will determine the order, right? So each startup it's very hard to generalize here because each startup would probably need to put some more weight or some priority on certain points, and maybe someone that seems or looks like pretty similar to them, however, needs to put some more depth on another point. Now, the second point that I want to make here is that even though these are 10 points, it doesn't translate into 10 slides. Okay, it's very usual that people tell me, oh, so we have to have a deck with 10 slides. It's like, no, you probably need like 10 slides just to describe problem. Actually, in most cases, problem and solution tend to require at least 50% of your slides of a pitch deck. The other 8 points normally take 1 to 2 slides tops, depending on how fluid you make it. We do have an advantage now, which is like being online and doing all these pitches remotely kind of hides the reality of maybe having a pitch deck with 100 slides. Okay, because some people freak out. It's like, I cannot do a pitch deck with 100 slides. And Alex says, yes, you can, my dear, you can. I've delivered a 10-minute keynote with 90 slides. Okay, so that's a lot of slides per minute. Okay, that's nearly 10 slides per minute. That's the kind of speed you can imprint on some of these things, right? You normally have the standard, the average of the industry right now. It's roughly around 3 minutes, 2.5 to 3 minutes, which means that it's increasingly hard to showcase all of these 10 points. Okay, if you go to a 4-5 minute pitch, you can fit in all these 10 points with ease. Okay, should be more than easy to do. Well, not easy, but you need to train, but you can do it. 3 minute pitch, it becomes quite difficult. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's difficult, and you need to train, and you need to understand that each word matters. So, as I was saying, the way to understand these 10 points is not as a direct correlation between 1 point and 1 slide, but understanding that each of these points really responds to a certain question that the audience is having as you keep progressing in your conversation. So another way of looking at this is, imagine that you're giving a talk to a friend at a bar, you're having some beers or you're having some coffee, and with your face masks, please. So protection among the first thing. But you're having a chat with some friends and you're trying to explain what you're doing. Well, they're going to have some questions. And as you keep explaining what you're devoting your time to, instead of working in a big corporation and making a lot of theoretical money, the reality is that normally you're going to see, you're going to have to explain these things. Well, the problem with a pitch is that you don't have the questions coming your way in the same way you would have with a conversation on a bar, right? At a bar. So, someone is beeping around there. So the thing is, you have to understand that you're going to have these things. Let me go back because something is beeping here. Is it me beeping? Or someone is beeping? Let me just... Okay, that's not me. Oh. Alexa, stop. Sorry about that. That's what happens when you have an echo. Anyway, let's see if this works. No. Okay. So let me go back to this. Anyway, so I'm going to go through each of these points. Okay. And but again, well, my point with this was that you're not going to hear the question from the audience. And your job as a pitcher, as a startup, is to kind of predict what kind of question is coming your way next, even if people are not asking it. Now, as I was saying, if you've pitched before, you know the kind of questions that people are gonna people normally ask you, because you've told your friends, you've told your colleagues, and you know what kind of questions you're gonna get. So, and I know this is going live, so whoever needs to censor this, please censor it. Don't be stupid. Okay, and if you're getting a question all the time, make sure you put it in your pitch, because that's the kind of question people keep having. Okay, So be preemptive. The more preemptive you are about predicting what kind of question the audience is going to have next, the more magical your pitch becomes, and the better feeling it comes through as someone that you go like, oh, whoa, this guys really know their stuff. They really know their industry. And I can tell you, as someone that listens to gazillion pitches every year, that in the first 10 to 15 seconds, based on the way someone talks, the way they explain the problem, you know if they know their stuff or not. It just takes that 15 seconds to suddenly go like, yep, I know what this person gets it or this person doesn't get it. Okay. Anyway, so let's start with we start at the beginning, probably. So the first question that everyone has is, okay, what are you doing and what is this about? Okay. However, most people, when they answer this question, they tend to focus on the what do we do. And there's a reason for doing that, okay? When someone actually verbalizes this question, it's like, oh, Alex, so what do you do? What does Press 42 does, or what does the Aleph does, right? And you're very tempted to follow through with that question. It's like, oh, well, we do X, Y, Z. Now, the problem with this question is that it's incomplete. Most of the times, I would say 98% of the time, someone asks you, what do you do? There's a direct question, which is, what do you do? And then there is a unspoken question, which is, and why should I care? and why does it have to do something with me, right? This is very typical, especially when you bump into someone in a conference, when we had conferences where you could bump with people, or you talk with someone and a colleague or something. It's like, okay, what do you do? But more importantly, how does that have to do with me? Right? So it's very important that you understand that the key to doing a very good pitch, and let me make this very clear, 80% of the weight of your pitch is between problem and solution. If you do not get problem right, you will disconnect everyone. Okay? And the rest doesn't really matter. So most of our effort in general gets invested in the problem solution tandem. But most importantly, you need to nail down, why should people in the audience care? And that sometimes is easy, sometimes it's not. Because sometimes you guys build a startup that's very niche, which means that you're catering your pitch to a very narrow segment of the audience in general. Now, the problem is, however, you never know who is on the other side. And sometimes when you go on a stage or when you do this kind of like live emissions, you don't know who's listening to the other side, on the other side, right? So the audience might be extremely generalistic. So it is your job to try and connect the niche audience with the general audience within the first few seconds, few minutes of the pitch, right? Now, the best way to do this, if you're in that case, because not every startup, some startups are B2C and very, very generalistic, which means that, hey, we're solving global hunger. Great. That works for everyone. Everyone's going to understand this stuff. Okay. But in other cases, you have some stuff that is way, way, way more technical, right? I was just talking with a startup yesterday, 2 days ago, where they are doing a lot of key disruptive things with graphene, which is advanced materials, right? The amount of people that understand what graphene is and what you can do with graphene is very small, right? So it's like, okay, you really need to explain to people how doing things with graphene actually benefits them. So the key here for the pitch is understanding that even if you're going to a niche, your job as a startup founder, as a pitcher, is to make sure that a 4 or 5 year old gets it. That is the baseline. And the best way to go around this is, it doesn't matter if you have someone that comes to you and tells you, oh yeah, that was pretty obvious. Well, obvious is the best friend of a pitcher, of a storyteller. If they tell you it's obvious, you're doing a great job. Better obvious than having someone looking at you like, huh? What are you talking about? I have no clue what you're talking about, okay? So the best way to connect one with the other, to go from niche to generalistic, is understanding that whatever you're solving, whatever pain you're fixing for the niche audience, for your niche customers, fixing that, if you're doing it right, fixing that normally has massive implications to the general population. So I might be working on a key technology for surgeons, but there is an impact for patients, because if the surgeon actually fixes this issue they have and they can do better surgery, it means that more people come out alive out of the surgery room, right? So there's always an implication for the general population, and you need to find that. The teams that create this bridge, the better pitchers they become, right? The stronger this bridge, the more clear it is how one thing impacts the other one, the better the pitch is going to go. Now, just a very quick mention here is, one of the things I tend to see a lot is that you guys sometimes don't fully understand the problem you're solving. You kind of have a very shallow understanding of where the issue is, but then you sometimes don't fully understand the depth of the issue, right? So I invite you, oops, I don't have it. I invite you to ask yourself what we call the 5 whys, right? Ask yourself, why is this a problem, right? And most people will only answer the first time, right? This is a problem because, we need faster chipsets to be able to deliver, video on demand or whatever. That's great. I'm not saying that's not the problem. However, there's normally an underlying cause here, right? And I could keep asking, okay, so why do we have slow chips, right? Oh, well, we have slow chips because, the foundries cannot work with under certain nanometers of technology and blah, blah, blah. Or why don't we have more powerful chipsets as well? Because they get designed elsewhere, but they get produced in China, and now China is not delivering because they're in a commercial war with the US, for example. This could be an issue. Well, this is an issue right now. But my point is, the more whys you ask, the more depth of understanding you need to display. And I'm not saying that you should show all those whys on your pitch, but there's a big difference between someone that fully understands the whole scope of the cause and effect sequence of how you end up having the problem you're trying to solve, and someone that just asks that question in a very shallow way. I'm not saying shallow is bad. I'm just saying that there is a big difference in the impact of the pitch, and more importantly, on the perception from the other side as someone that, oh, okay, these guys have actually, or these gals have actually really focused and understand this problem. You can see this very clearly when you have startups that are co-founded by people that have worked in a corporation for a long time. In that sense, it's very easy to detect them because, hey, don't get me wrong, this is not criticism, but they go slow as shit in their development schedule, but they're very good at understanding the depth of the problem. Why? Because they've been fighting with it for 10 years. They've been suffering it from the inside for 10 years. Okay, so there is a difference. So even though you don't expose all the sequence, it is good that you do that exercise and you fully pinpoint where the issue really is. I cannot count the amount of times I've actually had someone pitching me and telling them, yeah, but that is not the problem. They said, like, yeah, that's the problem. It's like, no, that's not the problem. This is a problem. And then someone going completely blank and they go like, oh, well, yeah, but I'm like, no, but if you fix that, then your problem doesn't exist. And they go like, yeah, but we still want to do this because it's cool. It's like, okay, be my guest, but don't be surprised if then someone comes, fixes the underlying problem and takes you out of the market. Okay, so keep that in mind. Anyway, solution, very easy. Be careful not to be too technical on one side or too abstract on the other one. It's very usual that you guys describe. We're going from the why you do what you do, which is the problem, to the what we do, which is the solution. Now, when we describe the what, as I was saying, try to avoid technical words or technical acronyms, because the moment you throw some acronyms around the place and people don't understand them, then you lose your audience. Now, you can keep your acronyms on the screen if that makes you feel better, but make sure your narrative never depends on them for the narrative to be understood. Now, on the other extreme, on the other side, you have the problem of using vacuous or empty words like big data or AI. Okay, AI doesn't mean shit. Okay, I'm an AI specialist. I did AI, and AI is humongous. You can go from machine learning, and within machine learning, you can go from deep learning all the way to statistic methods, all the way to pure basic mathematic equations that have been known since the 40s. Okay, so it is important that you are quite deterministic about what you do. Now, the key here, or the challenge, is how do I remove the ambiguity of explaining what we do without being technical, right? And that's why it's a challenge. However, if you don't remember that every time you use the technical word, God kills the kitten, okay? So please do remember that. And do remember that the best way to do problem solution is always telling a story. If you have some kind of mock-up, if you have some kind of use case, if you have some personal story you can use to describe where the issue is, where the pain is, and how you solve it, even better. There's nothing better than actually walking someone by the hand through a tiny little story where you highlight how you fix this, how you solve this. That's the best way to remove the ambiguity, is by showing people. There's this big maxim in storytelling that says, don't tell me how it works. Show me how it works. The best understanding comes by showing people how your product works, how your idea works, right? Because it's the one way we're visual creatures. So the moment we see this, you go like, that's what you mean by blah, blah, blah. Okay, so it's very easy to then focus exactly on what you're trying to solve. Okay, this, by the way, this also creates other problems, which is, oh, now I get it. So yeah, then you're doing something similar to what Dropbox is doing, or you're doing something similar to what Spotify is doing, and then you need to fix that other issue. And that's what we're going to move forward. Now, a third point is, hey, there needs to be some money to be made here. So how big is the pie? Okay. And here, when we're talking about the market, you have also two extremes. On one side, you have, if you're tackling a market that's very crowded, you better explain to me why on earth did you decided to go in a place where there's like 20,000 startups that have 200 million funding behind them and you're going like, yeah, I'm going to build the next Uber, or I'm going to build the next, whatever company received $200 million. Okay, so you better explain what we call the strategic canvas. The only reason why this would make any sense at all to do is because those incumbents that are in this super crowded market are using legacy technology, which means that for whatever reason, there's a disruption from a technological perspective, and you figure out that, hey, with this tiny little niche disruptive technology that no one is paying any attention to in this field, we can actually create or deploy a completely different business model that would disrupt the market. So you do need to explain this. That's what people are going to look for. It's like, hey, don't tell me you're going to do another social network. If you're going to do another social network, or if you're going to do something around content, you better explain to me what you're doing that's really, really differential, or I'm not going to believe you're going to be able to pull it off. You have the other point of this, which is I never heard about this vertical at all, right? And so in that case, you better show scale. Example, like the one I was talking about, using graphene to create chips, right? Well, to use it in the semiconductor industry. So if you don't know anything about the semiconductor industry, you have no idea how much money there is behind this, okay? So you do need to be a little bit more specific and show that, hey, even though this seems or looks like a tiny market and there are not a lot of players, the margin per player is massive. Okay, so there's a lot of money to be made. Now, obviously, if I understand that, it's time to talk about who's out there doing something similar. do not lie about this, because if people know the space, they know who is out there. You want people to recognize people, other companies that are your competitors or potential competitors, that they can recognize and say, oh yeah, I know this guys. Best way from my point of view, again, you can do it however you want. The best way for me, especially on a visual, from a visual perspective, is to try and draw them on a chart. So you can easily see that the more distance there is between you and them, the stronger the moat, the stronger the barriers of entry are. Now, how do you choose these dimensions? They directly correlate to what is your differentiation value, right? So if you're putting on the axis, you're mapping something like our website is mobile versus these people are not mobile, then you go like, well, maybe nowadays, maybe then that's not a big differentiation point. But there are others that do matter. Okay, I'm not saying this doesn't matter. Don't get me wrong. There are certain industries where the fact of having mobile only or mobile first is definitely disruptive. Just giving it as an example. Okay, so now what people want to see here is people they can recognize. And now a big question that people ask me always here is, but what kind of competitors do we need to add here? Is that, well, this is the question is very simple. Is how exactly are people solving the problem right now? Okay, and I can assure you, if there's pain behind the problem, people are trying to solve it. And they might be solving it in the most inefficient way ever, which is not solving it, or they might be solving it with pen and paper, or they're solving it by thinking about it and then doing what we use the oscillation finger technique, which is, well, I think that more or less we should do this, right? Now, the case is there are people that are fixing this in a maybe less efficient way as you are trying to do. Good example is like, Google spreadsheets or Microsoft Excel spreadsheets is a competitor in many cases because it's the way some people are fixing this issue, right? And in most occasions, people ignore this stuff. It's like, hey, if Google makes a twist here or Airtable makes a twist here, you're screwed because they're literally pushing you out. Or even Notion, for example. I don't know if you're following the whole Notion versus Roam versus note-taking bullshit, but Notion just added like a link back feature that is kind of direct attack against Roam. It kind of feels to me a little bit like the battle between Snap and Instagram, kind of similar shit, but going on the note-taking space. But anyway, this stuff happens, right? So you need to map them. You want people to recognize people here. Now, however, be honest about this. This chart you're looking at on screen right now, this is bullshit because this is not real. The reality looks sometimes, most of the time, something like this. You have people that are kind of very close by, but you still have a distance between you and them, right? And that is what you need to maintain, that kind of moat. I swear to God, if I hear another startup that tells me, these guys do the same stuff like that, like we do, but there's space for everyone. Bullshit. There's not space for everyone, right? Okay, if you're doing exactly the same thing as someone else, you really need to rethink your startup, right? Because the moment this person gets some funding, they will wipe you off the face of the market. Now, typical example, it's not the case right now, but it was the case like a year and a half ago. I don't know how many of you know Rocket Internet, but I heard so many startups complaining about Rocket's business of copycat, of copying other startups that were successful, bringing them to Europe and literally wiping out every single competitor. And people would come to me, some of the founders of these companies that got pushed out, and saying, yeah, man, it's so unfair. I mean, these guys come, they copy your stuff, and then, they get all the customers. It's like, dude, if they were capable of copying your product from the outside, and just by the virtue of throwing more money to the marketing machine, wipe you out, then you deserve to be wiped out. Because that means that your startup didn't really build something extremely differential. Because then, if that was the case, it would be very hard for them to copy it from the outside, much less just throwing marketing dollars at it. It would obviously have an effect, don't get me wrong, but it wouldn't probably take you out. Now, What really matters is to describe your moat. What are you using as a moat? And that's what we call technology or differentiation value. Here is the part where you can do all the name dropping you want. You want to drop the fact that you're using deep learning, that you're using reinforcement learning, that you're using machine learning with this and that, or Bayesian networks, or whatever it is you're using. Be my guest. Here's where you explain what you have and what makes you different. Obviously, this is about saying, hey, we're not twins. We have something different. Now, the most obvious way of adding a differentiation point is if you have any kind of intellectual property, IP, patent, or you already have a community behind you, so you have like what we call network effects, or even in some cases, which is not the best way to defend a project, but you have first mover advantage, right? That it's a real thing. Very rarely becomes the thing, right? A lot of people that keep saying, oh, first mover advantage, I was the first one here, they tend to get wiped out by the second or third wave of startups that come later on, okay? I would say Bitcoin / Ethereum / blockchain industry is one example of this, where you can clearly see this evolution. Social networks is another example of this. Anyway, another way of differentiating yourself is because you have a different feature set. However, that's a word that sometimes you don't want to get into, because then it becomes about who has more features. That's very, if we have any ladies in the room, probably they understand this very, very clearly, because that's the very male-driven way of competing. Mine is bigger than you. And it's pretty much stupid. I mean, not stupid, but it doesn't normally take you to a good place. It tends to end up in a price war, which is a place where you probably don't want to be, right? A better way of differentiating yourself is by virtue of having something powerful on the back end. Normally, it's either your own algorithms. Careful, I'm not saying using a library for deep learning, but actually fine-tuning your own algorithms, or even getting a model that's out there, but then training that model with your own things. Another way of looking at this is, hey, we have access to data that no one else has, or we're capable of producing synthetic data that no one else has, that allows us to train, even if we use off-the-shelf algorithms, it allows us to train our system in a very different way, which allows us to expose a certain feature that no one else can replicate. So even though they might try to copy it from the outside, it's very hard to deliver on the performance in the same way. And by performance, I don't mean speed, okay? I mean quality and value that you create on the feature. And last but not least, these are just ideas that you can play around with. Last but not least is the fact that, as I was saying at the beginning, because the technology stack is very similar across the board, it's getting to the point where usability and user experience actually matters a lot. Okay, we have the case of Slack, we have the case of Snap, or War versus Snap and Instagram, for example, experience-wise. TikTok right now is another very good example. Even if you have something similar or a similar technology, the fact that some people really deeply care about the user experience from the beginning makes a big impact on the product. I mean, even if you wanted to replicate TikTok, like a lot of companies are doing, including Instagram, it is very, with Reel, I don't know, I guess you've all seen Reel by now. It's pretty bullshit. But anyway, that's a different story. But my point with this is, front-end design or front-end exposure or usability is not just about the eye candy. It goes way deeper on the strategy of how you build a product. The way you understand the path of your user and how this should be built will determine a lot of the decisions that you make building the actual product. The outcome is the front end, obviously, and the niceness of use. But when you have very similar products from a technical perspective, those that are easier to work with are the ones that win the day. Even if your technology delivers a slightly worse value or slightly less efficiency, this is starting to weight a lot. So it's another way of differentiating. There's just 3 different ideas on how to move forward. Business model, this is basic and it's very easy to understand. Show me the money. How are you going to make money? How is the money going to get? How are you going to become sustainable, basically? I'm not going to go deeper into this, but it's pretty easy to understand. Number 7, sorry, go-to-marketing strategy. So essentially, how are you going to capture your clients? If you already have if you don't have clients because you're very early stage, then you better explain to us what is your strategy to find them, right? How are you going to scale this? Because, for example, if you say that, hey, we're going to do something in the last mile delivery space, it's like, okay, dude, but that is very expensive from a CapEx point of view, and it's extremely fragmented, which means that you better have a very good strategy on how to capture your customers, or you probably won't be able to fly. Okay, so be precise about what kind of strategies are you going to follow. Or let me rephrase this. People want to know that you have actually thought about this, because too many startups get to this point and say like, yeah, we will grow and we will get clients because we're that shit. Well, that's not true. That's not how it works. Okay. On the other hand, some of you guys already have a prototype, already have some kind of traction, in which case, show it. Because even though you're early stage, even though you might not have a massive volume of users or of customers, what people really want to see is the trend, right? Even if you have 3 customers, but if those 3 customers are super engaged with your product and they're not your friends or your mom, then it's very relevant, because it shows that some people are very, very real with they're very excited about what you're doing, right? So those trends matter. And obviously, if you're growing 200,000 users a month, then I'm not going to even ask you any question. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it, because clearly it's working. Okay, so data trumps any explanation any day. Okay, so the more data you have, the less explanation you have to do. Now, last but not least, team. The reason why we have team here is because we want to see who's behind this, and if they have all the capacities, all the skill set that is needed to pull this off. Some industries require certain skill sets or more skill sets than others. So, for example, if you're in fintech, for example, it is good that you have someone that has at least some kind of experience in the financial institution space, right? Or if you're in fashion, for example, or if you're in the music industry. Those are very complicated markets that require someone that, or ideally, you want to see someone that has had some experience, even if it's from a corporate side. Okay. Now, when we're talking about the team, try not to go crazy. Some people just suddenly put this huge biographies of everyone. No, just put the relevant things that are relevant to the project, to the startup, right? So we have John, who is the CEO. He was a former VP of product of Facebook. Then we have Jane. So she was a CTO, former CTO at Instagram. And it matters because, for example, I might be creating something in social media space, and hey, my team is conformed from people from the space, right? That they built this stuff before, so they know what they're doing, or they've sold a company before, or they've raised money before, right? And obviously, who's in the mud, right? You know it. That's Steve. That's an intern. That's always an intern. Remember that. Anyway, jokes apart. Point number 9, it's milestones and projections, which is divided into 2 parts. The first part is we want to know, where exactly are you? What have you achieved so far, right? Do you have a prototype? Is people trying the prototype? Do you have any clients? Do you have any letters of intention? Do you have any kind of feedback? Whatever it is. Obviously, the more business related the milestones, the better. It's very usual that when you're very early stage, the one milestone is we got accepted into Tetuan Valley. It's like, well, hey, we're honored about that, but that's not a fucking milestone, okay? A milestone is, hey, we got our first customer paying. That is a milestone. However, when you're very early stage, that's what you do. It's the one thing you have, and it is a validation. Don't get me wrong. And you can ask the team; they've been challenged with all the interviews that they have been doing, and they had a hard time selecting the you guys here. So kudos to everyone that made it. But my point, what we want to see is business-wise here, right? And on the other hand, you have the projections, which is, what are you going to do next? How ambitious are you around your project? Do you intend on sticking to a certain market, or you're starting with a very ambitious plan from early on, right? In all honesty, as a Spaniard and having worked with teams all over the world, in general in Spain, specifically in Spain, but in a generalistic way in Europe, our ambitions tend to be pretty low. We don't believe that we can build this kind of stuff. I still remember this conversation years and years ago when we started Tetuan Valley, and when my partners asked me, Alex, why do you want to start this? Because the story goes that I came with this project to my partners, and I said, like, I want to build this, but I need help. And they said, like, you're out of your freaking mind, Alex. You can all build this here. And I said, like, yes, you can. We have to start somewhere, right? So let's build this. And the one question they asked me is, like, what do you want to achieve with this? And I said, guys, I want to be able to have our startups go on an international stage and kick the crap out of any international startup out there. At the time, and I know we have US friends connected, at the time was US startups, right? They were the reference point. I'm not sure they are right now, to be honest. I'm sorry, guys. Pun intended. And those that have watched the debate yesterday, I'm so sorry for your loss. But at the time when we started more than 15 years ago, it was more than 10 years ago, it was US startups that there was a reference point, right? Europe didn't have a startup ecosystem. Now it's a completely different story. We have different very powerful ecosystems, not just in the US or not just out of Silicon Valley. You have it in Seattle, you have it in Austin, you have it in New York City, even in places like Florida, like Miami, and obviously all across the spectrum in the world, Singapore, Hong Kong, ranging to Warsaw, to Krakow, you name it. They're very powerful ecosystems all around. So, however, in Europe and specifically in Spain, we tend to be that we still don't believe that we can build things that are big, that matter, right? And I think we need to rethink these things, because you can. I've seen badass companies coming out from the most obscure, I won't even say hubs, obscure towns. And you go like, whoa, you were in where? You came from which town in Estonia? Because, hey, Estonia, yeah, I'm in Tallinn, great. But which little town in Estonia, you said? And they built this amazing company, okay? So here's where we want to measure this kind of things. Anyway, last but not least, never, ever, 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 ever finish your pitch by getting to the end and saying, and that's it. Thank you. That's all. Okay. Call to action. If you're looking for fundraising, you ask for funds. If you're looking for a partner, you ask for a partner. This is the moment where we say that we do the ask, right? If you're looking for something, this is the right moment to ask for it. But more importantly is you need to close the pitch by reminding people that why you're doing what you're doing, to remind people how painful it is what you're fixing and what happens, what are the consequences of not fixing this. I always say this, and most of you always remember this phrase, but you need to kill someone in your pitch, right? Your problem needs to be the kind of problem that if you don't solve it, someone dies. And more specifically, if you can kill a baby, even better, right? So, Sergio, we need some t-shirts that say something like, well, we need 2 t-shirts. I would say like, yes, if it was easy, we wouldn't be doing this. And another one that is like, you need to kill the baby, right? You need to kill the baby. And here, the call to action, final point, you need to go we normally visualize the pitch as in a linear fashion, but you should understand that the pitch should be something circular, right? That you start at the beginning, you go around in a circle, and you end up in the same point from the beginning, right? Back to the beginning. There's no beginning, there's no end. It's more of the same. And here you need to bring back that feeling of like, look, if you don't help us fix this, if we don't fix this issue, a baby will die. You need to remind people. I know it's pretty extreme, but some of you, I'm pretty sure you will eventually find your baby, and you will eventually find a way to threaten the baby. Well, let me go back to this. I don't have time to this, but just, well, I'm not gonna talk about this because most of you already know it. Anyway, these are my details. That's my Twitter, that's my email. Sergio and Inigo also have my contacts, but that was all from my side. It was a lot of information. It will take some time to seep in, but hopefully we have this recording, so you can always go back, and you have my contact details, so you can ask me too. And that's all from my side. And let me go through the questions.
We have some questions over here. I don't know if you can see them already. I will put it on the screen.
Okay, okay, you're putting them. I think you can remember what have been the 2 or 3 most extraordinary, remarkable presentations you have seen. Oh wow, that is a very hard question for me to answer. I see so many that it's hard. It's hard to choose one. You know, you will see a lot of people working on pitching. I've been doing this for more than 15 years. I see a lot of people working on pitching and being pitching mentors and talking about this stuff. The conversation tends to be a black or white level, and some people go like, this pitch is trash, or this pitch is fantastic. That's, at least from my point of view, that's not real. That's not real. There's a lot of grace, because in a lot of occasions, it depends a lot on the industry. It depends a lot on how complicated it is what you're building. And in a lot of, and maybe the key thing here is understanding what was the starting point, right? So I see pitches that when I saw them the first time were absolutely atrocious. It was like, oh my God, like I just want to take my eyes with a spoon, okay? However, you work with them, they work the pitch, and then the final result is like, hey, you know what? This became obvious, and I can understand it now. And then you show this pitch to other people, and they go like, yeah, of course, Alex, this is, yeah, it doesn't have the razzle dazzle magic. And you go like, you motherfucker, you didn't even see the original one. You have no idea how far this pitch has come. So that's why for me it's hard to answer this, because I think what we should focus is not that much on the wowness factor of a pitch, but more on the evolution that you see from day 1 to day 2. And in that sense, to be honest, I think the best advice I can give you in terms of a referral point is to listen. To have that, the best people I work with, the best pitches I see come from people that sit down, listen, and go like, huh, that's interesting. Let me try different things. There are 2 groups: people that listen and actually take this kind of advice. I'm not talking about my personal advice, okay? It's they listen to people when they pitch, and the kind of questions they get back, and they're like, you know, we need to put that in the pitch. Why? Because it's coming up all the time. Those people that are more flexible about that, those are the ones that get the best pitches. And it doesn't matter about the wow. The wow comes when you've done this many times, and eventually happens. So it's not about one pitch that you go like, I can focus on this one and go like, let's imitate this. It all depends where you're starting from, right? I hope that kind of answers. Anyway, there's the $1 Racer Club. If you haven't seen that video pitch, it's not a pitch, it's a video pitch. If you can check that video, it's an epic video, and it has absolutely every single point of a good pitch is out there, but it's a movie more than anything else. I keep hearing about teams being one of the most important elements at an early stage. I've seen some people recommend starting with this, as it might be your best foot forward. Very good question. Yes and no. The reason why teams, especially in early stage companies, is critical is because, sorry, is because in 80% or more of the cases, you have no idea what the hell you're building. As a startup, you have no idea. You think you have an idea, you think you might build that stuff, but you might be very wrong. And a lot of that, well, you might not. You will probably be wrong most of the times. And then what really matters, especially from people from the other side, like investors, I sometimes invest in companies personally, Alex, but I work with a lot of VCs. I work with a lot of M&A companies. And what we see from the other side is, I don't really care that much about the idea because I might even have more experience than you have seeing companies in that space. So what really matters to me is if I give you the feedback, or if you discover the reality on your own and you do tests and you realize that this is not going to fly, either because you're following the intuition that someone shared with you, or the experience that someone shared with you, or your intuition or your own hypothesis testing sequence, then what really matters is that you have a team that's willing to drop this original idea and go and follow the data and follow what the market is telling you. Now, that's the reason why the team matters in very early stage companies, right? And that's why people feel that it's important. Now, when it comes to a pitch, the only reason why you would displace the team from the final part of the pitch to the beginning, and take this with quotes, is because you have someone in your team that brings a lot of rapport to your knowledge. So, as I was giving the example of the financial industry or imagine the music industry, right? If you have someone that has worked for 25 years at EMI or at Sony or something like that, or one of the big record labels, right? And you want to say that. You want to say, the moment you say, hey, this is a problem, and the reason why we know the problem is because our co-founder has worked trying to fix this from the inside of the industry for 20 years, then whatever you say afterwards gets some kind of a new perspective, a new validation, because, hey, this is not coming from a newbie. This is coming from a veteran. And there's certain degree of respect for someone that has been fighting for that or building those systems for a very long time. Now, careful here. That doesn't mean that you put the team first. You still need some context before you can understand why that person matters to the pitch, right? To the company. So normally what we say is you do problem, you explain the pain point, and then if you have the luck of having someone like that on your company, or someone that has sold or IPO'd a company before, then after the problem you say and well, we know this because one of our advisors or one of our co-founders has started 3 companies in this space, and this is his 4th company, right? So we know this very well. And when he was working at Revolut, they realized that this was an issue, and so they left Revolut and they started building this, right? So then it kind of puts everything into context, and that's why it matters. So that's why I'm saying careful with taking some of this advice without reasoning why it matters. So a lot of people do a lot of generalization, including a lot of VCs, and then when they actually see the implementation of their own advice, they go yeah, nah, why do you talk about this now? And then the founders go because you told me so. And then they go yeah, but I didn't really mean this. Okay, so be very careful to take my own advice, what I'm giving you, take them with a grain of salt, right? Think about it, meditate about it, and try to understand why. What I always try to share with you guys is the reason why we have these elements here and there. Because if you understand the why, then it gives you the freedom to change it and put it wherever you feel, because you understand why we're doing it, right? So I hope, Andreina, that kind of makes a little bit more sense. So yes, you're right. Team is extremely important from a seed company perspective, but when it comes to the pitch, what matters is the feeling with them, that they're willing to respond and willing to listen. By listening doesn't mean following shit as it's given, That's a mistake. And don't take my word as law, and never ever take the mentor's words as law. You need to reason it first and take your own conclusions, because you will eventually see, especially those of you guys that have more experience, you will see that you will always end up with contradictory advice. One mentor tells you A, the other mentor tells you B. You have huge respect for both mentors, and we get shit wrong all the time. Okay, so you make your own decisions. That's what makes a good entrepreneur, a good founder, is that, hey, I listen to everything, I process everything, but then I make my own decisions about it, and I can justify them. That's a key point. It's like I can justify them, and it's not because, hey, this guy was nicer to me than the other ones. Okay, I hope that kind of answers it.
Okay, thank you very much, Alex. We don't have so much time for the questions, so teams, I see some of them are people from the teams. We will try to ask you, we will to reply all the questions during the pitch and feedback session later, okay?
Okay, well, I actually do need to go running, but I hope it was helpful. And again, Sergio has my contacts. More than glad to talk with anyone else out of band. And if you have any other doubts or any other doubts that tend to creep up as you build the pitch and you go like, yeah, I don't feel the love here, I think this might not be good, okay? Or you have Sergio or Inigo or any of the mentors giving you a lot of shit during your pitch, come to Daddy and I'll help you out with it. But anyway, it was my absolute pleasure. Thank you all very much for being here. I really, I don't know, this is a personal feeling, but I've been fighting for a long time for more diversity in tech, and the fact that we have several women entrepreneurs, it's fantastic. We need more. So if you have more friends, please help them, push them, try to help them build companies. So thank you all the ladies here. Thank you so much for being here. It is tough in this world, but the more we have, the better it's going to go. So thank you very much, everyone. Pleasure.
Thank you very much, Alex. It's a pleasure always to have you here, in this case in virtual presence, but always great. Okay, so we have Karel over here. I think now you can see the presentation. See you, Alex. Karel, are you over here? Yes. Device not connected. Give me a second. I see you have some questions about the pitch. We will have time to read them all during the pitch and feedback sessions. We will have these sessions all the sessions that we will have online. So don't worry about it. After the 6 sessions that we will have here, I'm quite sure you will have a great pitch. So don't worry about it. I see you, Karel. Yes. Okay.
I'm here. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, okay. You're live now.
Thank you.
That's great.
Thank you, Sergio. So a little bit of background on this specific talk. I spoke with Sergio very early in the week. I had another appointment today, so we decided to do this talk after Alex talk. So I knew beforehand that I will have barely 10 or 20 minutes to talk, since Alex apparently likes to talk a lot. I'm getting used to. I have to know him from, I don't know, maybe for he's still here. And so the good thing is I've seen most of your websites, or at least some of them. I also knew 3 of the teams from my previous experience in Google for startups, in the founders space. So I think most of you know already what of this lean startup movement is about, how to achieve it, how to put the user in the center of everything that we do. But today what I want to do is to explain the main differences between 3 methodologies that I've been hearing about a lot in the last couple of years, and some people don't know how to use them, and also how to approach them, or when to use it, when one is a little bit more useful than the others. And also one of those methodologies is of course Lean Startup, that for sure you know most of it. But what I want to explain to you is the kind of the specific task that will allow you to validate those assumptions that you have, or how you can approach Lean Startup from a very practical way. And also, as you know, here in Tetuan Valley, we give you a lot of homework to do on a weekly basis. So I'm going to basically explain the 3 main activities and why I think these activities are important for you. Because sometimes I've seen so many early stage teams not having like the right conversations. Just the day-to-day, you have a lot of work, and you don't usually have the time to think about, to prioritize, and to say, okay, let's talk about our product. How is the product that we want to build it? Which problem? Is a painkiller? Is a vitamin? How we are going to approach our customers? Where are our customers? And so on and so on. So it's very, very important, at least from my side, to explain this for you, so you have like a more clear framework about how to approach the very earliest stages of your startups. And again, I know a few of the projects that are already here today, and I know that for them, or preparing this talk, I was having them in my mind saying, okay, I want this to be useful for this, for this, for this. I know the stage, more or less the stage of these startups, so maybe they can use this activity more than the other one. So let's start. But yeah, a little bit of my background. I was born in Tetuan Valley. I spent there 4 years, the 4 most amazing years of my career so far. Then I moved into Startup Explore because I really liked to know more about investments. So I really like how Startup Explore approach to investment and how they analyze startups. That allows me as well to invest in few companies. So far, invested in 6 of them. I think among the 6 of them, 3 of them are Tetuan Valley alumni. I also participated in several open innovation programs, and recently I kind of co-founded some sort of a business school focused on agriculture in the south of Spain. And of course, my last work was at Google for Startups, and now working on something else. So basically, I want you to know 3 different methodologies that we all have heard about in the last couple of years. Design thinking, Lean Startup, and also design sprint. Basically, those methodologies aim to put the user in the center of our project. When Alex was teaching about the pitch, we need to think about who is going to listen this pitch and give a direct message to these people, whether it's an investor, whether it's a potential customer, whether it's a user, whether it's an accelerator to be accepted in our accelerator. We need to put that person in the center of everything we're going to do for the rest of the project. So we have basically 3 different methodologies that aims to put the user in the center of our project, but with different approaches, I would say. Here, since I'm going to send this presentation to you, here is some material that I read back in my days to more or less know a little bit more about this. I would highly suggest all those 3 books, but especially the first 2 ones, since they're kind of more easy to read than the 3rd one. And basically, all those 3 methods, what they want to do is to apply the same philosophy that I said, that to put the users into in the first place. First, you need to understand the context that you are creating your solution, your service, your product, and get to know a little bit better about that context. When Alex was saying, I'm starting a company in the music industry, the music industry is very, very tough. It's very difficult to run a profitable business in this industry, but you show that you know the context. How do you know the context? Because you used to work at this company, you used to support this other organization, you used to work with this other guy, and you know the problem, you know the context, you know the framework of the industry, the main players, the inefficiencies of that industry. Then you enter into the stage of the validation, because we all think that the problems that we have, everyone has the same problems, and that we think if a problem is this size of is this big, then all the potential users that are like me, they are going to value the problem as the same as I am valuing it. But we need to make sure that the problem is the same for all the potential users that we are approaching. We need to make sure that whatever we're building, there is enough audience out there that is validated, and we kind of spot it and figure out where those users are and how they are suffering from this problem. Then we start to build our solution, build the first MVP. You're going to have a specific session about how to build technical products. I think the most common minimum viable product, and then we start with the phase of iteration. We need to launch it. We need to measure how the users are using it, and we need to see, okay, how our users and when our users is using it. Why I'm telling you this? Because all, even though they have the same philosophy, those methodologies are applied in different ways. For example, we have the pre-product stage when we just have the challenge. In that case, we will use design thinking, because design thinking put a little bit more of emphasis of understanding the context, of understanding how this problem or where challenge we could prioritize first in order to build a proper solution. Then lean startups is very commonly used when you want to build a product when you already know about the problem. Okay, this is for sure. I spent 20 years in the tourist industry. This is the product that I want to build. Now I want to launch it, iterate, learn from the users, and create a better version. But for sure, I think our solution will be more or less about this specific thing. That's why lean startup is the methodology that we use in the startup school. If we were about to talk about, I don't know, students that wants to become entrepreneurs, probably we will use the design thinking methodology, because we need to put a little bit of emphasis about, okay, try to analyze the main challenges that this industry or this problem has, and then try to prioritize those challenges. And then we will see how to build a product. And then we have design sprint. Design sprint is another methodology created by Google Ventures, Checknap. And it's very easy methodology, because it's the framework is just 5 days, full 5 days, full time, 5 days full time. And then you can basically apply the same methodology every other day, you know. So here, to put it in a bit of background, when I see those methodologies be used, for example, design thinking, when, as I said, when you don't have any specific challenge that you might work with, for example, I remember back in my days in Tetuan Valley, we worked with the human resources department of a consulting firm, and then they said, well, what we want to do is to increase the well-being of our employees, but we don't know how to do it. It could be an app that will do something. It could be remote work. This was like 2 or 3 years ago. It could be we don't know what's the specific product we are going to build. But the main challenge is a little bit an abstract, is increase the well-being of our employees. So then we have to see where are the specific challenges, how we can spot the main issues of the well-being of the employees in this specific company, so we can build something useful. It's also something very, very useful when you don't want to analyze the business model behind the idea that you are working on, because sometimes there is not the space for a business model. It's more about create something that will truly solve that specific challenge. And that's why design thinking methodologies has been used in NGOs and public administration. Also, the lean startup, as I was saying, is when you already know the problem and you have the problem is kind of narrow and you know where you want to work, but you need something for build that product that eventually will be backed by a business model. That's why business model is also another talk or another session that you are going to have here. And design sprint, as I was saying, is perhaps when you have your product a little bit more advanced and your main challenge or your main problem is to prioritize features. I've seen many startups that after a year and a half or 2 years, they run a design sprint saying, okay, we have these 4 or 5 features, but the business model is coming from these 2. That is also the 2 features less used by our users. So we have a little bit of dysfunction here between what we think about our problem, what the users are doing, and where the money is coming from. So we need to figure out how to prioritize features and make it a sustainable business model. In that case, I suggested to you to use the design sprint methodology. So let's start with the lean startup model. Basically, what I want you to do, maybe I will suggest that, or I would assume that most of you are familiar with this concept. So basically, I'm going to explain very briefly the 3 activities that I want you to do, and the 3 activities that you have to show some work, some results to the team of Tetuan Valley. And maybe we can give enough time to answer some questions and maybe do some clarifications about this work. So the first one is to get to know very well your hypotheses. Hypotheses are when the founders, when the team gather together and say, our users need this. Our problem is the best one in the market, or the cheapest one, or the ones with this mode, as Alex Barrera was saying. Our customers thinks that this problem is this one. So basically, this is an activity that I want you to put all the knowledge, all the information that you have about your current project in 4 different categories. Because at the end of the day, what we want to do is to validate your hypothesis. And with the work that you're going to do with the pitch session, studying different business models, creating the product from the technical point of view, incorporating your company, looking for investment, you need to somehow validate the assumptions, the hypotheses that you are going to write it down in this first task. These 4 categories are just merely a suggestion: product, markets, customers, and users. You can come up with another category if you will, but I find those 4 highly useful to have this conversation with your users. The hypothesis about the product. Okay, how the product is going to look like, what the product is going to do, which features are going to have. Is going to be free or not, or is going to be this way or that way? Is going to be a service? Which percentage of the whole project is going to be product either or services? How can a layer of services could add up some value to the product, and so on and so on. There is 2 segmentations, 2 different categories, if this helps you, which is divided the product into vitamin product or into painkiller products. A vitamin is something that is nice to have, but if the user don't have it, he won't die. Basically, it's a product where you have to spend a lot of time positioning yourself in marketing and feeling more, or make the user or customers feeling more inspirational about your current product. Whether a painkiller, you have to be very straight with your communication, how much money you're going to save, how much time you're going to save with our solution. This is key for you because cyber attacks are going to stop by 40% in the next 6 months, and whatever it is. I'm not saying that one is better than the other, or if you have a product, how to make it painkiller. But I'm saying that you have to be very clear about how your product is going to be. And knowing these 2 categories, then you will build a whole new project up on those categories, because again, it's not something that is nice to have, and it's a tough conversation realizing that your product maybe is something that is nice to have, but it's not a painkiller. Products like, I don't know, B2C or the direct-to-consumer brands, for example, could be a vitamin, whether cybersecurity most of the times are a painkiller, okay? Then we need to validate our hypothesis about the market, in which market we are operating on, in which markets we want to operate. The market could be easily divided into highly growing markets or stable markets. That's the two categories that I use the most. Why those two categories? Because if you are, for example, in the cybersecurity space that is growing like hell every year, and is normal to, or is common to think that that the cybersecurity market is going to be twice the size that it is today. So, hey, we are in this market, it's growing. Our solution is not maybe 100% complete. Our marketing sucks, but companies are asking for this specific product, and we need to build it very, very quickly. Whether if it's a very stable market, you need to be highly disruptive in the current situation that they are or that are already there, because changing the behavior or of the customer is going to be very, very difficult. And I probably barely say nothing positive about my current bank, but I never changed the bank. For example, it's true that I use a lot of fintech for different things, but at the end of the day, my salary comes for the same bank that I had when my parents opened an account when I was, I don't know, 10 years old or something like that. Okay, so if you are a fintech, you better have a disruptive solution. You better have something that is at least 10x better than the current solution that is out there in the market. So that's the two main differentiations that we'll do. It's growing, whether it's a growing market like cybersecurity or I don't know, autonomous vehicles and something like that, or if it's an unstable market like, I don't know, banking, insurance, that the size of the market won't grow, but the disruptive solution that you have could be an important, or could become an important player inside that market. Also, we need to review our knowledge of our customers, whether if we know where they are, and also something that I find very useful is to try to know how much money your customers is spending in trying to solve that solution. For example, we all want to eat healthier than we currently eat. That's fine, but it's good to know how much money your customers are spending on, I don't know, on honest greens versus McDonald's, or buying vegetables against meat or ice cream. So getting to know those numbers will validate or will set up the ground floor for our assumptions or our hypotheses to be validated. Okay? Just to finish with this slide, I find it very, very useful, these two tips that you have at the bottom. Try to do not validate all hypotheses at the same time. That is very, very important. When you finish with this exercise, you're going to have like 20 different hypotheses that you, during your work here at Tetuan Valley, will somehow validate. But the main point is try to not validate all the assumptions in the next coming weeks, because that is going to end up in a Frankenstein monster of a project. And also, your MVP won't solve all the problems. Here, you have to focus on the kind of the best hypothesis, or the hypothesis that you think will have more runway or could solve the biggest problem. So your MVP is not going to be a painkiller that is could, for example, not be a painkiller that stays or operates in a growth market, and also attack different kind of users with high purchasing powers, users with low purchasing power. So that is important to get to know beforehand, that accept that all your hypotheses won't be validated in the short term of your project, or at least during your time here at Tetuan Valley. The second exercise, I think this one is I really like it. This one is very, very interesting. Is doing some primary market research, where you have to do some research on the user groups that you think could be interested in your product, and also doing some interviews. The first exercise is you have all the founders of your team gathered together and said, okay, let's try to find out 16 up to 20 different groups, users, that could be interested in our project. Could be, and because I'm sick of entrepreneurs saying, oh, our product is for people from 18 to 35 years old. Totally different purchasing power, things that we value, things that we do in our day-to-day, even though I am a professor in a business school, and they said, no, students in university, it's not the same with 18 years old, you just arrived into a new city, than when you are doing a master's. Completely different priorities. So try to think about 16 different market niches that your product could make sense. Out of those 16 up to 20, try to start the funnel, make it a little bit smaller, and then think about 8, the best ones, or the ones that you are get more familiar, or the ones that you already thought in the beginning. And those 8, you have to measure them in terms of size, accessibility, competitors, and transferability. In terms of size, I don't want the specific number, but if we are talking about teenagers in Portugal or teenagers in the US, of course, teenagers in the US is going to be bigger than teenagers in Portugal, for example. So, or if we are talking about students in Madrid rather than students in, I don't know, Zamora, of course, students in Madrid is going to be a bigger group. So I want you to think about how big the market is going to be when we approach these first users. Also, accessibility, very important for startups, very important for B2B startups. Alex was saying before, it's important that you have the right contacts in those markets. So if we are we divided between students in Madrid and students in Lisbon, for example, but we live in Madrid, we are young people, and we have some connections close to business schools in Madrid, then the accessibility of this group is better than the accessibility of the other group. So that has to work better than the other, or that has to be to add points more than the other. That's why accessibility is very, very important for entrepreneurs when they're starting with their project. I always say you better have your first 100 users or customers in your telephone contacts. That's something that I always say when I analyze startups as an investor. Also, competitors. If we're thinking about 2 different markets, for example, thinking about launch our project here in Spain or launch our project in Argentina, then we need to evaluate the competitors in Spain and in Argentina. This is extremely useful where you are thinking about startup models or a project that could be inspired by other solutions that you have seen in other markets. Those projects known as copycats. So if you're going to be another Globo, you have to think about this, okay, where the markets Globo still don't have any presence, they don't have any competitors, and it makes sense to build a Globo out of this market because I think in terms of size is very big. And I am originally from this market, so could make sense to build a Globo here because it's still not a competitor here in this market. And the last one, transferability, is something very, very picky. When you have done with the previous 3 categories, size, accessibility, and competitors, then you already have your list about the 8 best markets or user groups to approach. And then let's say that in the number 1, you have students in Madrid. In the number 2, you have students in Germany, in Berlin, for example. And in the number 3, you have students in Barcelona. As you can see, transferability means how easy is to launch the product in a very specific market and then move into another market. I'm talking about features. I'm going to talking about how the product or the service looks like. I'm talking about marketing material. I'm talking about languages. So if you have the first user group is going to be students in Madrid and you launch the project, and then the second one is going to be students in Berlin, you need to, I don't know, hire a country manager a city manager in Berlin, translate the whole material, the app, the product, the marketing material. And then you see that the third market is students in Barcelona, so you don't need to translate the whole app, the whole marketing material, and the whole approach. So maybe in that case, would make sense that in the third position, even though Barcelona against Berlin is worse in terms of size, accessibility, and competitors, then that position will move into the second position. So transferability is something that not many entrepreneurs consider when they are talking about how they are going to expand in other markets, but it's also something very, very, very important, especially taking into account how much of this product could be built for insurance companies and then moved into banking companies to use the same product, or at least 80% of the product. Okay, so we went from 16 to 8. We measure more at the macroeconomic level those 8, and now we went to 4, and now to 1, where the main goal is to do the beachhead market. The beachhead market at the end of the day is to do interviews in the 4 most potential, or the best niche market that are over there, and then do interviews to the people. As I said, students do interviews that are students that are in Madrid, students that are in Berlin, students that are in Barcelona, students that are in Lisbon, and then try to how we are going to approach these people, and then interview about the problem that we want to solve it. And when we do all these things together, we come up to a beachhead market. A beachhead market is a group of users or a specific market that you have to have in your mind for the next, I would say, 3 months or even more, 6 months. The product that you're building, the marketing strategies, how you're going to approach the users, who you're going to talk with, accelerators that you are going to apply, investors that you want to work with, all of them has to have a meaning of being related to this group of people, to this beachhead market. And just to finish very, very quickly, for sure most of you having already done some interviews to your potential users. Here, I just want to give you a few tips. The first one is to understand the problem from its roots. It's about not showing our product or not talking about our product and how smart we are that we figure out that this very big problem exists in the market, but about how the user, how they feel it when they suffer from the problem, how much money do you spend already trying to figure out the problem, the solution, how pain in the ass is this problem for them, and so on and so on. So I want you to think more about a conversation rather than an interview. Of course, you have to have several questions or several specific topics that you want to know, but try to be more as a conversation rather than as an interview. And a question that all the time comes up is when you have done this exercise to, let's say, 35 different people, let's say 7 per group, divided by 4 groups, then you will see some patterns in those 4 groups. You will see that the problem affects way more to this group rather than this group. These people have more purchasing power in this category rather than in this category, and that allows you to redefine and make and then eventually build a better product. I remember that in Tetuan Valley, we won't allow people to touch any piece of code to build nothing until they have done a lot of validation, a lot of interviews with the potential users. So let's keep it this way. Do your interviews. Before you do the interviews, please figure out or study the best niche groups to approach. There are thousands of different categories now with the COVID. We have more access, I would say, to Zoom conversations. So that's why I think this activity could be done very, very easily and more quickly than a year ago. And that will help you to iterate and redefine the different features that your product is going to have in the MVP. And that's it. That is everything from my side. I hope that I knew that most of you know a little bit about Lean Startup, but here I try to put it into the ground, divide it in 3 different activities, and how to do those 3 different activities.